I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. This week, I'm excited to welcome both Jack Newton, CEO and co-founder of Clio, and George Psiharis, COO of Clio, to the podcast. We were able to get them both to take a break from this year's Clio Cloud Conference to talk about what service means in 2020. We're going to cover many of the insights that they shared from their talk at this year's Clio Cloud Conference, as well as what I thought was important and what we should be taking away from their talks when we think about service. There's a lot packed in this interview, so let's get to it. Hey, 5-Star listeners. Before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chat bots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-STAR. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Jack Newton, George Psiharis, I'm really excited to have both of you here, taking time out of your day from ClioCon. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to be here.
So, gentlemen, we're here to talk about, primarily for me, client service, how lawyers can learn to better deliver their client service, which results in a better client experience on the other side. You know, bringing what I learned working for the Four Seasons hotels, how can we make things better for clients? This has obviously been a big focus for y'all this year as part of ClioCon. Open up with a wide question of where did this come from as I look over your shoulder, Jack, and see client-centered law firm sitting in the background?
Yeah, well, I've been passionate about this for a long time. I remember back at ABA Tech Show 2009, I think at Matt Homan's Ignite Law event, giving a talk. And in fact, I used an example from the Four Seasons Hotel, talking about the importance of client experience and of thinking really deliberately about the client service you're delivering from your law firm. So, to me, some of what we've done this year at ClioCon and some of the features we've shipped is a really exciting culmination of almost a decade of work in working our way iteratively and progressively towards being able to deliver on some of the tools that we were envisioning, even a decade ago. And we spent, a lot of time and effort and energy building the foundations for a productive, effective law practice, building, what I describe sometimes as the operating system for legal. And with that in place, we're now able to start almost the second chapter of our journey in terms of building the client experience platform for legal. And, we've got now, I think, the opportunity to truly transform not just how law firms operate internally, but transform the experience they're delivering to their clients and to allow them to really set themselves apart from the competition in terms of the type of experience they're delivering to clients.
Interesting. George, anything to add to that?
Yeah, plus one to all of that. And the other piece I'd add is as we got more and more curious over that decade, we started to publish this annual study that we call the Legal Trends Report. And it was really eye-opening for us to get deeper into analysis and discover just how wide the service and experience chasm was between lawyers and clients, in particular in their expectations. So we always had this deep passion that Jack described, but in getting really close to the problem and getting curious and understanding it further, the gap was, I think, even a bit wider than we expected. And clearly, it was an important place to get started.
Exactly. You got to get started somewhere before you can make any gains. One of the things that I got from the speech on Tuesday was, the first concept of the age of experience. And you had mentioned Airbnb as an example. And when you picked Airbnb, were you doing it? Here, the connection to me between Airbnb and what they do for the hosts seems to me similar to what Clio is attempting to do for small and solo law firms. I know there's a pitch for the larger law firms, but what Clio is apparently trying to do, and obviously feel free to take and run with this, is, small law firms, solo law firms don't have the operational efficiencies that, Four Seasons, a Marriott, a Disney do. But y'all are, as you say, building the backbone of what this can be so that we're at less of a disadvantage, much like the Airbnb host isn't going to get the operational reach to advertise. Right. So, Jack, I can see you just itching to go. So I'm going to let you start talking.
I'm just nodding because I think you've hit the nail on its head, which is really, we're trying to empower the individual law firm. And that could be a solo law firm, or we've got customers. We've got some of the biggest AmLaw 10 firms in the world that we count as Clio customers. So I think we run the whole spectrum of firm size, but the common thread is that we're empowering those law firms to deliver amazing experiences to their clients without having to reinvent the wheel themselves. And in the same way that, the Airbnb host could roll their own platform to deliver what Airbnb delivers, it just wouldn't be economically feasible. So that's one piece of what we're trying to do. We also think, like Airbnb, there's opportunity to better connect consumer demand and lawyers that can help address that demand rather. And unlike Airbnb, which has gone the direction of building a marketplace, we don't actually think the right play for legal is to build a marketplace. We think that marketplace already exists, and that marketplace is Google. This is where 86% of consumer searches for lawyers start. And our job, we see it, is to position Clio customers as the winners in that search battle to stand out on top of Google's rankings. And winning that battle today, by the way, is no longer about SEO games and figuring out how you can stand out, with some clever keyword placements in your header tags. It's instead about how do you create client experiences that have them going out and leaving positive reviews for you online, helping refer other clients to your law firm, and helping build what I describe in my book as the law firm flywheel of growth. And that flywheel of growth today is more important in a COVID and post-COVID world than it's ever been, because those happy customers can actually amplify their impact online. So that's where this age of experience is so important, because the law firms that win will be like the Airbnb hosts that win, and will be like any other service provider to consumers that will win in the future are going to be the ones that focus on experience and customer happiness. And we're trying to make that almost an automatic side effect of embracing and adopting the Clio platform.
Excellent. George, nodding along.
Yeah, obviously deeply passionate about the same insights. And to round out Jack's statement there, I think one thing we've seen over the course of 2020, and in particular accelerated by the pandemic, is lawyer expectations meet client expectations and converge for one of the first times. So we're typically used to seeing clients, both prospective and those that have retained a lawyer for their services, have their expectations set by what they consume in daily life. They're used to ordering things online. They're used to engaging with services in a certain way. And traditionally, their experiences upon working with law firms have been quite different. A big driver for that has been a bit of lawyer resistance around adopting a client-centric mindset, or perhaps not feeling empowered and enabled to provide that. In addition to Clio providing the tools as we have and making a series of announcements and technology innovations as we've been thrilled to do this week, we've also seen lawyer mindsets shift in an incredibly accelerated way once the initial impacts of the pandemic hit. We're almost phrasing this as what we expected to happen in 10 to 15 years happening in 3 months.
Oh, exactly.
Really, really eye-opening to see that this year.
No, I mean, in my own practice, seeing clients immediately shift to having the initial consults for estate planning almost all by Zoom. I've had, even though I'm not a litigator, I've been a part of several trials alongside the litigators for my clients, where I'm sitting in my house, shirt and tie, from the keyboard up, and you can't tell that I'm barefoot. The judges so far not noticed or even asked, which has been wonderful. On the Google My Business integration, that was really interesting to see. Not something I think anybody, you kept the secret on that pretty well. I know personally from my firm, Google My Business has been one of the side drivers, because even though if you do a search for estate planning attorney Houston, even if you drive that market or the map size quite small, I'm still not going to pop up as the top one, but I'm still getting clients from that. Why? Because the empowered client is going in, they're seeing reviews, and they're, generally the ones I want to deal with, I guess is a good thing. They're scrolling past the first 2 or 3 knowing that if they just take the first one, that's not it. That probably is a trick or an ad, and they're getting bound to me further on. So tell me a little bit more about the Google My Business. How did that develop? Was that a, thought from the inside from y'all, reach out from Google? How did that work?
Yeah, it was actually serendipitous in the sense that it came from both sides at the same time, more or less. So Google reached out to us because they've started investing pretty aggressively in maturing and developing legal as one of their core markets. And when they look to a new market, they, generally speaking, look to partner with a leader in that category, in that industry, as part of their go-to-market motion. And this is something they did in the restaurant industry, for example. They partnered with OpenTable and helped integrate reservations and other OpenTable features directly into Google My Business for restaurants that were on Google My Business. And when Google looked to the legal industry, the market leader they selected was Clio, and they approached us about ways we could collaborate within the legal space. And simultaneously, the work stream that was happening on the Clio side was a result of our acquisition of Lexicata a couple of years ago, which we just celebrated 2-year anniversary almost to the day, acquiring Lexicata, which we transformed into our second product, Clio Grow. And really, Clio Grow's mandate, its reason for being, is to help law firms grow and scale their client base. And in helping them grow and scale, of course, a big part of that is acquisition. Where do you go online to acquire leads? And there's many sources that you can acquire leads. There's sites like Avo, there's other lead gen services, and of course there's Google, where you're going to be potentially driving a lot of paid demand and obviously driving organic demand as well. So when we looked at the various partners we could look to integrating with on the Grow side, Google was at the top of our list. And so it really a lucky confluence of events in that just as Google was looking to focus on the legal industry, we were looking to find a really exciting new integration partner to bring to the table, bring under the tent, so to speak, within Clio land. And Google was that partner. So really excited to announce this Google My Business integration. I think, without being hyperbolic about it at all, it is a game changer, because most law firms do not even understand the fact they've got a Google My Business profile, and claiming your profile, setting it up properly, but then also making sure that you've got the flywheel happening that's actually feeding your profile and helping drive its relevance and prominence, and that you've got this effortless customer experience wired up to your profile is something that is beyond reach for most law firms. And we've made that as simple as, clicking a few buttons in Clio to get that all set up. So really, really excited to help with this transition to online demand capture and connecting with clients in the cloud. And by the way, there was already a trend, to George's comment around a decade or more of growth being compressed into as many weeks. There was already a trend to legal demand moving online, and that has only been accelerated by COVID. So this is a well-timed product announcement, because lawyers are not capturing demand in their local chamber of commerce meeting anymore. They're not going to networking events. They're not even networking with other lawyers at CLEs anymore. You need to think about, how am I capturing demand online? And the answer is a really simple answer. You need to do that with Google, and you can do that easily now through the Clio and Google integration.
Excellent. We've only got about 10 minutes left. I have all these questions and points that I took from the talk. One of the ones that just lines up with what I learned from my days back at the Four Seasons, you'd said delight doesn't pay off. One of the things that we had at the hotel was not some imperative of blow people's minds in every encounter. I've been told, and you've probably heard the story of Joshi, where somebody left their 2-year-old left the squishy toy at the Ritz-Carlton, and so the staff took pictures and everything.
I actually used Joffrey in my extended talk about client experiences. I love that story.
And in one sense, it's great. And in another kind of realistic, it sets this expectation that we can't be expected to follow up on of, well, if anything goes wrong, make sure you spend an afternoon kind of customizing this expert thing. When a lot of times, when people were checking into the hotel, when they were checking out, they didn't need a grand production. They wanted that effortless experience.
They want to walk out the front door.
Yeah, like, can I have my keys? Can I go to my room now?
And have that door open when they want to exit, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So, I thought it was great because there is a point of diminishing returns. And so we're focusing on results because, as a service provider, while we all get lumped into what is thought of as the service economy, we're not a restaurant, we're not Disney, we're not a movie theater. People are coming to us for a result. And it's not, the result is not happiness necessarily. It's, sue this person, get me some compensation for an injury, or, have the will drawn up so I've got a plan in place.
Yeah, you've touched on so much in there. And, just a couple of observations from my perspective. One problem with this expectation that delight will be what drives your customer experience is that opportunities for delight just don't crop up all that often. Those Joffrey stories, as heartwarming as they are often opportunities for delight that are few and far between. The other point you highlighted is the most crucial one, though, which is the rapidly diminishing returns after you've met your client expectations and going above and beyond, the old adage of under promise and over deliver turns out to actually be really misplaced advice. The best advice is meet exactly the client's expectations, but make everything about interacting with you as effortless as possible. And this is a concept that Chris Dixon talks a lot about in his book called The Effortless Experience, which has been hugely influential to both George and my own thinking around how these concepts apply to the legal industry. And one of the really important concepts in my book that I kind of apply this line of thinking to, and that you saw referenced in the presentations on Tuesday, is this idea that too many lawyers think about differentiating themselves on the legal deliverable. I'm going to give you the best will, or the purchase agreement for your house is going to be better than any other lawyer could deliver. And the truth of the matter is that, number one, client expectations are just for a good enough will. They don't necessarily need the best will in the world. But the idea of even differentiating on the actual deliverable is really tough, right? Like being able to say, number one, you're probably violating every ethics rule in the book saying, I do a better will than the guy across the street. The place you can truly differentiate is in the experience that you deliver. That's the opportunity. And that's the place that you can truly and easily, by the way, create differentiation around your law firm and the service you deliver. And maybe I'll invite George to layer in with some commentary as well around the legal trends report, because I think one of the surprising findings we found year over year is that there is ample room for improvement just in that meeting expectations piece. I'm thinking about last year's report, for example, on responsiveness, George. Just meeting that bar of consumer expectations is a place there's a lot of room for improvement to be made in the legal industry.
Yeah, that's a great lead in to unpack some of the insights that we've been able to explore over the years. And I think a key starting point is in us producing analysis to help practitioners understand what their own expectations are as they're articulated and what the most basic and essential of expectations are among clients. And to the point around delight, I think we'd be better off understanding and executing against the basics of what service experiences are. So we actually did a kind of a campaign last year where we researched the responsiveness of law firms and inquired with about 1,000 and called 500 law firms to test their response times, and found that 60% of firms never responded to inquiries at all.
I know. I remember sitting in and listening on that, and part of me was not shocked and also thinking, oh my God, I hope it wasn't me. And then you said it wasn't an estate planning firm. It was, I think, bankruptcy and PI. I was like,
and just repeat the stat for anyone that thinks they misheard you, George.
Yeah,
no, please do.
50% of inquiries went unanswered altogether. So before we get too far into the realm of the Ritz-Carlton returning a toddler's most prized possession as a delight experience. We're having an experience, and admittedly, this was pre-pandemic, and this may have altered in this digital world where demand is sagging and we see a lot of deferral among clients, but I don't expect it will have changed drastically just yet, where a couple of things are taking place. First, lawyers are missing on the basics of what anyone would expect in an effortless experience. And the good news there is that improvement is incremental, but also quite possible. I don't look at that and think that this is some kind of, dark art form that someone needs to master. It's literally being responsive in a way that you too, as a consumer, would appreciate and approve of. The second thing that's really interesting to me is clients often don't know what expectations to have. So unlike a lot of other experiences that they have or are quite accustomed to that they might be doing on a regular cadence, whether that's weekly, monthly, every day, you name it, there's this great abbreviation, acronym rather, that's a practitioner shared with me, which is FTFT, which means first time for them. As a practitioner, you're versed in doing stuff day in, day out. So you're quite familiar with what the expectations are. Or, for example, a week goes by and there's no new development. You're not concerned about that. But consider that for many of your clients, they have absolutely no idea what their expectations are. So in this year's Legal Trends Report overview analysis, I brought up this concept of SLAs, which are service level agreements. Often that journey back to Jack's point around meeting expectations as opposed to blowing them out of the water starts with setting them and starts with educating your clients on what reasonable expectations are. Like, hey, for this next stage of your matter with us, if you don't hear from me for 2 weeks, that's actually okay. Now consider if they hear from you within that 2-week window, they'll be satisfied. Consider that if you don't tell them that and don't contact them in 2 weeks, they're filling every narrative in their mind around what's going on, why they haven't heard from you, that you might be ghosting them. And that's one example of, I think, possibly dozens, if not hundreds of folks could think of in this first time for them mindset. So, not only are we missing the basics in terms of service levels, we're also often not identifying them and then not asking clients for their feedback at all in the process. So, like I said, the good news is lots of low-hanging fruit and very clear places to improve that I think everyone can embrace once they're in the right mindset.
Right. And as we start to land the plane on this interview, because I think you all have to get to another one momentarily, one of the things that it makes me think of is a change we've started doing in the last 2 weeks. As we export clients from Grow to Manage, we've started having my intake person is now responsible for sending a handoff email just saying, we've signed your engagement letter. If you haven't paid your retainer, here's the link, and copying our paralegal, Heather, because then they know who the next person is that they need to talk to. And it's not just, sure, they got the signed copy of their engagement letter, but once we know that they're going into the system or moving from one system to the other, giving that handoff so that they know what happens. And that's just the first stage of this. It's not the end of it. Incrementally, we'll go in and tweak the language on that form email so that they know, all right, you're doing this type of matter. We know these are the next 5 things. This is when you can expect to see something. So we're running low on time. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Maybe for my end, John, I think I'll just emphasize, we've talked about maybe where some of the gaps are, but I want to highlight or maybe end on an optimistic and positive note, which is there's a playbook for getting all of this right. And I know this resonates with you from your Four Seasons experience as well, but just this idea of being client-centered, embracing technology, being cloud-based, I think is a starting point and almost table stakes these days. But understand that technology is not enough on its own. You need the mindset that will help you create these experiences for your client. And that mindset, the appropriate mindset, is to be client-centered. And it's, build empathy for your client. As you just mentioned, understand the points in the journey that they might have anxiety. As George was pointing out, this first time for them kind of mindset is I think a good example of an empathetic mindset, and guide them through a journey that is going to be something that you can make repeatable and make a wonderful experience and a unique experience that leaves net promoters at the end of your interactions with them. And, go embrace that cloud-based client-centered mindset. Adopt it in an incremental way. You don't need to boil the ocean. You don't need to make a set of sweeping changes at once. George in his talk talked about this Dave Brailsford British cycling team concept of the aggregation of marginal gains. You can make incremental changes, make them on a daily or weekly basis, and you'll be able to get to a really wonderful place over the course of several months, over the course of a year. So that's my closing optimistic thought.
Absolutely.
I'd love to round it out with one final notion too, in building on the optimistic take, and that is, I also am a huge advocate for a growth mindset and often not looking at things as a zero-sum game. And that's a kind of economics term around one person's gain has to come directly as a result of another person's loss or net loss. I think that these improvements that enhance the client experience and remove friction also stand to make life better for practitioners and the people who work with them in law firms as well. So it's not just this mindset of make everything easier on your client, but harder on you. We do fundamentally believe, and I'm deeply passionate and convinced that making these experiences more effortless is also less friction for you as well, and a really key step forward to take. So don't rule that out. And it's certainly empathy for the client. And once that starts to really work, I think it really immediately translates into a more seamless experience for the lawyers and their firms as well.
Excellent. Jack Newton, George Psiharis, thanks so much for joining us on the 5-Star Council podcast.
Thanks for having us.
This was great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcouncil.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcouncil.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.